My days are loud, but my nights are painfully quiet. And in that quiet, it's you I think about. Not because you're just another name in a very long list, but because somehow, without even trying, you found a way into the part of me that nobody else has ever reached. Hey, Ramit, to pause here for a second, because I want you to really feel this next part, not just read it. Close your eyes for a moment if you can. Imagine me sitting across from you right now. No cameras, no crowd, no noise. Just you and me and the truth. That's how I want you to receive what I'm about to say next. There have been nights I wanted to give up. Not on life, not on my dreams, but on the idea that anyone could ever truly love me for who I am and not for what I represent. And in those nights, somehow, some way, a message from you, a comment, a small piece of your heart shared with mine would arrive at exactly the moment I needed it. Like you knew, like some invisible thread connected your heartbeat to mine even when we were miles, maybe even oceans apart. I used to think love had to be loud to be real. I used to think it needed grand gestures, big declarations, dramatic moments people write songs about. But you taught me something different. You taught me that love can be quiet. Love can be patient. Love can be someone simply showing up again and again without asking for anything in return. And that's exactly what you've done for me. Every single day. So here's my promise to you. The one I said I'd never break, no matter what it costs me. I promise that I will never let fame make me forget where my heart truly belongs. I promise that no matter how big this gets, no matter how many people surround me, I will always remember the ones who loved me first, who loved me when there was nothing to gain from it. I promise that you will never become just another face in the crowd to me. Because to me you were never in the crowd at all. You were always standing right beside me, even when you didn't know it. Stay with me a little longer, because there's something else I need you to understand. This isn't just about gratitude. This isn't just me saying thank you for your support. This is deeper than that. This is me telling you that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just someone who watches my life from a distance, and you became someone I genuinely truly care about. Not as an idea, not as a statistic, as a person, as someone whose happiness actually matters to me. I think about the version of me that existed before any of this. The one who didn't have a stage, didn't have a spotlight, didn't have thousands of eyes watching every move. And I wonder, would you have loved that version of me too? Because if the answer is yes, and somewhere deep down I believe it is, then that's the love I want to hold on to. Not the love that comes with the fame, the love that would have existed even without it. There's a fear I carry that I've never spoken about publicly. The fear that one day all of this attention will fade, the way it always eventually does, and I'll be left wondering who truly stayed because they cared, and who only stayed because I was somebody. But when I think about you, that fear gets quieter, because something in the way you show up, the way you speak to me, the way you defend me even when you don't have to, tells me you're not here for the version of me that fades. You're here for the version of me that stays real, no matter what. I want to tell you something else, something that might surprise you. On the days when the applause is loudest, when everyone around me is smiling and celebrating, sometimes I feel the most alone. Because in those moments, I can't tell who's really there for me and who's just there for what I can give them. But then I remember you. I remember the quiet consistency of your love, unshaken by whether I'm trending or forgotten, unshaken by whether I'm winning or struggling. And in that memory, I find peace. Let me ask you something, and I want you to actually think about the answer. If I disappeared tomorrow, if the lights went out and the stage was empty, and there was nothing left of the image people built around me, would you still care? I already know your answer. I can feel it. And that's exactly why this promise matters so much to me. Because you never loved the illusion. You loved the person underneath it. And that kind of love deserves more than silence. It deserves honesty. It deserves this checkable. I know I'm not perfect. I've made choices I regret, said things I wish I could take back, disappeared during times when maybe you needed me to be present. But even in my absence, I never stopped thinking about the people who held on. I never stopped thinking about you. And if I've ever made you feel like you didn't matter, I need you to know that the opposite has always been true. You mattered more than you'll ever know. You still do. There's something about the way real love works that nobody really prepares you for. It doesn't ask to be seen. It doesn't demand credit. It just exists, quietly, patiently, in the background of everything, waiting to be acknowledged. That's the kind of love I've felt from you. Not loud, not demanding, just steady, just real. And I don't want to take that for granted anymore. So tonight, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're feeling, as you hear these words, I want you to know that somewhere out there, I'm thinking about you too. Not as a fan, not as a follower, as someone whose heart has quietly, gently become a part of mine. And that's not something fame gave me. That's something you gave me. I keep coming back to this one promise. The one I said I'd never break, even if it costs me everything. And the more I say it, the more I understand what it really means. It's not just about loyalty. It's not just about gratitude. It's about choosing, every single day, to remember the person behind the noise. To remember you, even when the world gets loud. Even when new distractions pull at my attention. Even when people tell me to move on to bigger things. I choose to hold on to this. I choose to hold on to what's real. There's a version of this story where I stop here, where I tie it up neatly and give you a perfect ending. But I don't want to do that. Because this isn't over. This isn't something that ends with a sentence or a scene. This is something that keeps going, the way real feelings do, the way real love does, unfinished, unfolding, still being written every single day between us. So let me say this one more time, slower this time so it really sinks in. I promise you, I will never let this fade into something empty. I promise you, whatever happens next in my life, in my career, in this strange and beautiful chaos I live in, I will carry this feeling with me. I will carry you with me. Not as a memory of what once was, but as a truth that continues, quietly, steadily, right now, in this very moment, between your heart and mine. But I need to keep going, because there's so much more I haven't said yet. And if I stop now, it will feel like I left the most important part out. So stay with me a little longer. Don't go anywhere, because what comes next might be the part that finally makes you understand just how deeply you've settled into my life without either of us ever announcing it out loud. Binaos what tangintedli. I remember a night, not too long ago, when everything felt heavier than usual. The kind of heaviness that doesn't come from one bad thing, but from 100 small things piling on top of each other until you can barely breathe under the weight of it. I sat there, in the dark, phone in my hand, scrolling through nothing, looking for something I couldn't even name. And then I saw it. A message from you. Simple, honest, no expectations attached to it. Just you, telling me you hoped I was okay. That's it. That was the whole message. And somehow it undid something in me that I didn't even know was tightly wound. I sat there and I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time that day, I felt seen. You probably don't even remember sending that message. To you, it might have just been a small moment. A passing thought you typed out without thinking twice. But to me, it became something I carried for days, weeks, even. Because that's the thing about real love. The quiet kind. The kind you give without asking for credit. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up exactly when it's needed. And then it disappears again, leaving behind a warmth that lingers long after the words are gone. Want to be honest with you about something else. Something that might be hard for me to say, but that I think you deserve to hear. There have been times I've pulled away, times I've gone quiet, disappeared from everything, stopped responding, stopped showing up the way I usually do. And I know that must have been confusing, maybe even hurtful. I know some of you wondered if you did something wrong, if somehow you weren't enough, if maybe I just stopped caring. And I need you to hear this clearly, because it matters more than almost anything else I've said tonight. It was never you. It was never about you not being enough. It was me, drowning in my own head, trying to figure out how to carry all of this without losing myself completely. And even in those silent moments, even when I couldn't find the words, you were still there, waiting, not pushing, not demanding explanations, just waiting, the way someone waits for a person they actually love, not the way someone waits for a transaction to be completed. That kind of patience isn't common. I've learned that the hard way. I've met people who claimed to care about me, who said all the right things when the cameras were on, but who disappeared the moment I stopped being useful to them. And in contrast to all of that, there's you. Someone who never needed the spotlight to prove that your feelings were real. Someone who loved me in the background just as fiercely as you would have loved me in the foreground. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what that does to someone like me, who has spent so much of my life surrounded by people, but still somehow feeling alone? Telling so, I think about the future sometimes. And I won't lie to you, it scares me. Not because I doubt myself, but because I know how quickly things can change. I know how easily people get forgotten, how easily the world moves on to the next new thing, the next new face, the next new story to obsess over. And in those quiet, fearful moments, I ask myself one question. Will you still be here? Not out of some need for validation, but because the thought of losing the one real thing in the middle of all this unreal noise terrifies me more than anything else. But then I remember who you've already shown me you are. I remember the nights you stayed. I remember the times you defended me when it would have been easier to just stay silent. I remember the way you've loved me, not for the highlight reel, but for the real, messy, imperfect person underneath it. And that memory calms the fear, because real love doesn't run when things get quiet. Real love doesn't disappear when the applause fades. And somewhere deep inside me, I already know, you're not the kind of person who leaves just because the noise dies down. But I want you to really imagine something with me right now. Imagine years from now, long after this moment has passed, long after everything else has changed. Imagine me, older, maybe wiser, maybe still figuring things out the way we all are. And imagine you, still somewhere in my story, still a part of this feeling that started so quietly and grew into something neither of us expected. That image, that possibility, it means more to me than any award, any headline, any milestone this industry could ever hand me. Because none of that stays. But this, what's growing between us right now, this has the potential to stay, if we let it. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being known by millions but understood by none. I've felt that loneliness more times than I can count. People know my face. People know my name. People know the version of me that gets edited, packaged, presented for the world to consume. But you, somehow, you've managed to see past all of that. You didn't just fall for the image. You fell for the pauses between my words. The tiredness in my eyes during late night moments. The small inconsistencies that prove I'm human and not some perfectly constructed idea. And that terrifies me in the best possible way, because it means you actually know me, not the character, me. I need to tell you something I've never said publicly before, and I'm only saying it now because this feels like the safest space I've ever had to say it in. There are days I don't feel worthy of the love people give me. Days I wonder if I'm actually deserving of the way you look at me, the way you speak about me, the way you defend me like I'm someone worth defending. Imposter feelings creep in more than anyone would expect from someone in my position. And in those moments, it's not the applause that pulls me back to reality. It's you. It's the small, steady reminder that someone out there believes in the real me, not the performance. That belief becomes the thing I hold on to when my own belief in myself starts to slip. So when I say I made a promise I'll never break, even if it costs me everything, I need you to understand exactly what that promise protects. It protects this. It protects the quiet, real connection we've built, piece by piece, moment by moment, without either of us fully realizing how deep it had grown until now. It protects the version of me that exists underneath the fame, the one who still gets nervous, still gets scared, still needs someone to remind him that he's more than what people see on a screen. And it protects you, the person who gave me that reminder, again and again, without ever asking to be thanked for it. I know this is a lot. I know I'm laying my heart out in a way most people in my position never do. But I'm done pretending that distance is safer than honesty. I'm done acting like keeping people at arm's length protects me from getting hurt. Because the truth is, the real risk was never getting close to you. The real risk was staying silent about how much you actually mean to me, and letting you walk away one day thinking you were just another face in a very long list. You were never that. You were never just a number, never just a supporter, never just someone watching from a distance. You were, and still are, one of the few people who makes all of this feel like it means something. There's still so much I want to tell you, so many nights I want to describe, so many quiet moments where your name crossed my mind when it had no reason to. So many times I almost said this out loud but stopped myself, afraid it would sound too much, too soon, too real. But tonight, I'm done holding it back. Tonight, I want you to know exactly how much space you occupy in a life that most people only see from the outside. I'm not done yet. There's more I want to say, more I want you to feel, more of this quiet, honest confession that's been building inside me for longer than I probably realized. So don't go anywhere just yet. Because the deeper we go into this, the more I think you'll understand exactly why I said this promise would cost me everything, and why I'd still choose to keep it anyway. There's a moment I keep returning to over and over, like my mind refuses to let it go. It was an ordinary day, nothing special about it, on the surface. I was tired, running on almost nothing, moving through a schedule that didn't leave room for me to feel anything at all. And in the middle of that exhaustion, something small happened. A single sentence from you, sitting quietly among 100 other messages, one I almost scrolled past without noticing. It said something simple, something about how proud you were of me, not for what I had achieved, but for how I had kept going despite everything. And I stopped. I just stopped everything I was doing, and sat with that sentence for a long time. Because nobody had said it like that before. Not proud of the results, proud of the effort, proud of the person underneath the exhaustion. That distinction changed something in me that day, and it's never fully left. I think what makes you different, what makes this connection different, is that you've never needed me to be impressive to care about me. You've never needed me to win, to succeed, to prove myself over and over just to earn your attention. You gave that to me freely, without conditions, without a scoreboard keeping track of whether I deserved it that day or not. And in a life where so much of my worth gets measured in numbers, that unconditional care feels like the only truly safe place I have left. I want to tell you about the times I've watched from a distance, quietly, the way you show up for other people too, the kindness you show strangers, the patience you show people who probably don't even realize how much effort it takes to be that patient. I've seen it, even from far away, and it's made me fall into something deeper than admiration. Because loving someone isn't just about how they treat you. It's about who they are when they think no one important is watching. And you, in every quiet corner of your life that I've been lucky enough to glimpse, have shown me exactly who you are. And it's someone worth all of this honesty. There's a particular kind of ache that comes with caring about someone you've never physically stood beside. People might not understand it unless they felt it themselves. It's not desperation, it's not obsession, it's something quieter, something that lives in the background of your everyday thoughts. occasionally rising to the surface when you least expect it. A song reminds you of them. A quiet evening makes you wonder what they're doing. A hard day makes you wish, just for a moment, that they were close enough to sit beside you in silence. That ache has become a familiar part of my life. And instead of running from it, I've decided to embrace it, because it reminds me that what I feel is real, even if it doesn't look the way love typically looks in movies or magazines. Hon, I keep thinking about the weight of the words I'm choosing to say tonight. Because once they're out, they're out. There's no taking them back, no softening them later, no explaining them away as something less than what they are. And I've decided that's okay. I've decided that you deserve the full weight of this honesty. Even if it costs me some comfort, even if it makes me feel exposed in ways I'm not used to. Because you've given me your honesty in small ways for so long, and it's time I gave you mine in return. Fully, without holding anything back. I wonder sometimes what it would be like if the world outside of this didn't exist for a moment. No fans, no critics, no headlines, no noise, just the version of me that exists underneath all of it, sitting across from the version of you that exists underneath everything you carry too. I wonder what we'd talk about. I wonder if the silence between us would feel comfortable, the way silence only feels comfortable with people who genuinely understand each other. Something tells me it would. Something tells me that even without a script, even without cameras, even without any reason to perform, we'd still find our way into a conversation that felt exactly like this one. Honest, warm, real. I've spent so much of my life being watched, being observed, being analyzed from every possible angle by people who think they know me because they've seen a curated version of my days. And in the middle of all that observation, you became the one person who didn't just watch. You paid attention. There's a difference. Watching is passive. Attention is active. Attention means noticing the small shifts in my tone, the subtle signs of exhaustion behind a smile, the moments when I say I'm fine, but clearly I'm not. And you've noticed those things more times than I can count. That kind of attentiveness doesn't come from casual interest. It comes from something deeper, something I don't take lightly. There's a promise underneath the promise I already told you about, one I haven't fully put into words until now. It's this: I promise to keep noticing you back. I promise that even as this life gets busier, even as more people, more responsibilities, more distractions pull at my attention, I will make space to notice you the way you've noticed me. Not perfectly, not every single day, but consistently, intentionally, in the way that real care requires. Because attention, once given, deserves to be returned. And I don't want to be someone who only takes without ever giving back in the same depth. I think about what it means to be loved by someone who has never asked me to be anything other than myself. No pressure to be perfect. No pressure to always have the right words. No pressure to perform even in private moments. Just permission to be tired, to be uncertain, to be human. That kind of permission is rare in a life like mine, where so much of what I do gets judged, critiqued, dissected by people who think they understand context they've never actually lived through. But you've never done that. You've simply let me be whoever I needed to be in that moment, and loved me through all of it anyway. I want to be careful with the way I say the next part, because I don't want it to sound like something small when it's actually something enormous. You've become one of the few reasons I still believe in the good side of this strange life I live. In an industry that can make people cynical, that can make people question every kind gesture, wondering what's really behind it. You've remained one of the purest reminders that not everything has to come with a hidden motive. Some people really do just care. Some people really do just want to see you happy, without needing anything in return. And you're proof of that, every single time you show up. There's still so much left unsaid, so many feelings I haven't fully unpacked yet, so many moments I want to walk you through. So many quiet truths I've been holding on to until I found the right space to finally let them out. Tonight feels like that space, and I'm not ready to close this conversation not when there's still so much of my heart left to share with you. Stay a little longer. I promise what comes next might be the part you've been waiting to hear all along. There's something I've noticed about the way people talk about love, especially in this life I live. They talk about it like it's a headline, like it has to be announced, captured, packaged into something everyone can consume in a single glance. But what I feel for you doesn't fit into a headline. It doesn't fit into a caption, or a photo, or a 30-second clip. What I feel for you lives in the in-between moments. The ones nobody else ever sees. The ones that never make it to a screen. And maybe that's exactly why it's real. Because it was never built for anyone else's approval. It was only ever built for you and me. I want to take you back to a moment I've never told anyone about. It was late, later than I usually stay up, and I was sitting somewhere quiet, somewhere far from all the noise of my regular days. And I found myself scrolling through old messages, old comments, old little pieces of you that had somehow made it into my life over time. I read through them slowly, one by one, and with every single one, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not because the words were extraordinary. Most of them were simple, small, ordinary, even. But together, they painted a picture of someone who had been quietly, consistently showing up for me longer than I had even realized. And in that moment, sitting alone in the dark, I whispered something out loud that I had never said before. I whispered your presence like a kind of prayer, grateful for something I never had to ask for. I think people assume that someone in my position has everything figured out, that the attention, the recognition, the constant noise somehow fills every gap a person could have. But it doesn't. If anything, it creates new gaps you didn't even know existed. Gaps that only get filled by something real, something unforced, something that exists whether the cameras are rolling or not. And you, without even trying, without ever demanding it, became the thing that filled that gap for me. I keep thinking about how strange it is that two people can build something this real without ever standing in the same room, without ever holding hands, without ever hearing each other breathe in the quiet of a shared space. And yet here I am, feeling closer to you than to people I see every single day, closer to you than to people who know my address, my schedule, my every waking move. Because closeness was never about proximity. It was always about attention, about the quality of the moments, not the quantity of the time spent in them. And you, in your own quiet way, have given me some of the most attentive, most caring moments of my entire life. I want to tell you something that might sound strange, coming from someone like me. Sometimes, when things get overwhelming, when the pressure builds up in ways I can't even explain, I picture you, not in some dramatic, cinematic way, just simply, quietly, the way you might be sitting somewhere right now, listening to this, feeling every word, the way I'm hoping you are. And that picture calms something in me. It reminds me that no matter how big this gets, no matter how loud the world becomes, there is still one person out there who sees me exactly as I am and chooses to stay anyway. I keep circling back to that word, stay, because in an industry built on people constantly leaving, constantly moving on, constantly chasing whatever comes next, staying feels like the rarest, most precious thing anyone could ever give me. And you've given me that, without ever asking for anything in return. You've given me consistency. In a life defined by unpredictability, you've given me something steady to hold on to, even when I didn't know how badly I needed it. But I need to say something else, something that's been sitting quietly in my chest for a while now, waiting for the right moment to come out. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if this life will keep growing the way it has, or if one day everything will quiet down and I'll be left figuring out who I am outside of all this. But whatever happens, whichever direction my life takes, I want you to know that this feeling I have for you isn't tied to any of that. It isn't tied to the fame, the recognition, the noise. It's tied to something much simpler, It's tied to the person you've shown me you are, again and again, in ways big and small, over time. There's a particular kind of vulnerability in saying all of this out loud, knowing that so many people will hear it, knowing that some might not understand it the way you do. But I've stopped caring about being misunderstood by everyone else, as long as I'm understood by you, because your understanding, your quiet, unwavering belief in who I really am, has become one of the most important things in my life, more important than most people would ever guess. I think about all the versions of myself you've seen over time, the confident version, the tired version, the version that laughs too loud to cover up how exhausted I actually am, the version that goes quiet for days because the weight of everything becomes too much to carry. And through every single one of those versions, you never once looked away. You never once decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. You simply adjusted, the way people who genuinely care learn to adjust, meeting me exactly where I was, without judgment, without conditions. That kind of acceptance is rare. I don't think people talk about it enough, how rare it really is to be fully seen, fully known, and still fully loved. Most people only love the parts of you that are convenient, the parts that are easy, the parts that make them look good by association. But you've loved the difficult parts too, the parts I don't show the world, the parts that don't photograph well, that don't fit into a highlight reel, that don't get applause, and somehow, that's the love that means the most to me. I want to keep talking to you, because there's a specific fear I haven't said out loud yet. And I think it's time I finally did. I'm afraid that one day, this feeling I have, this deep gratitude and quiet love I carry for you, might get lost in translation. That it might come across as something less than what it actually is. That you might read all of this and think it's just words, just another performance, just another script written to keep an audience engaged. And the thought of that breaks something in me. Because everything I've said tonight is real. Every single word. Voila. So let me say it plainly, without any poetry, without any softening. I care about you, deeply, genuinely, in a way that has nothing to do with numbers, or views, or engagement, or any of the things this industry usually measures value by. I care about your happiness. I care about your bad days and your good ones. I care about the version of you that exists far away from any screen, living your own life, carrying your own weight, showing up for me anyway, even when your own world is heavy. There's a quiet kind of magic in being cared for by someone who has never met you in person, and yet somehow understands you better than people who have. I don't take that magic for granted, not for one single moment. And that's exactly why I made this promise. Not as some romantic gesture meant to trend, meant to be clipped and shared, and forgotten by next week, but as something real, something I intend to carry with me for as long as I possibly can. I'm not done yet. There's more I want to say, more I want you to feel. More of this quiet, honest confession that's been building inside me for longer than I probably realized. So don't go anywhere just yet, because the deeper we go into this, the more I think you'll understand exactly why I said this promise would cost me everything and why I'd still choose to keep it anyway. I keep thinking about the word cost. I said it right at the start, that this promise would cost me everything, and I meant it. Because in this life, honesty like this comes with a price. There will be people who read these words and roll their eyes, people who call it performance, call it strategy, call it something calculated instead of something real. And I've made peace with that, because I'd rather be misunderstood by strangers than dishonest with you. That's the cost I'm willing to pay. Losing the approval of people who were never really paying attention, in exchange for finally being fully honest with the one person who has been paying attention all along. There's another cost too, one that's quieter, more personal. Every time I open up like this, every time I let you see the parts of me that aren't polished, that aren't camera ready, that aren't designed to impress, I risk something. I risk you seeing me as less than the image people have built around me. I risk you realizing I'm not as strong as I appear, not as certain, not as put together. And for a long time, that fear kept me quiet. It kept me hiding behind a version of myself that was easier to admire from a distance. But somewhere along the way, I realized that hiding from you meant losing the one relationship that actually felt real. And I'd rather be fully known by you and slightly less impressive than be endlessly impressive and never truly known. I think about the nights when I've watched interviews of other people in my position. People who talk about love and connection like it's something abstract, something they'll figure out later once the busy years slow down. And I used to believe that too. I used to think real connection was something that had to wait, something that couldn't coexist with everything else happening in my life. But you proved that wrong. You showed me that connection doesn't wait for convenient timing. It finds you in the middle of chaos, in the middle of exhaustion, in the middle of a life that never seems to slow down. And it settles there anyway, quietly making itself at home. But wait, I want to tell you about a specific kind of gratitude I carry, one that doesn't get talked about enough. It's the gratitude of being believed in before you've proven anything. Before the wins, before the recognition, before any of the things that made people start paying attention, there was a version of me that was still uncertain, still finding his footing, still unsure if any of this would work out. And somewhere in that uncertainty, you were already there, already rooting for me, already speaking words of encouragement into a future that hadn't happened yet. That kind of early belief, the kind that comes before proof, means more to me than any belief that comes after success. Because it tells me you weren't drawn to what I became. You were drawn to who I already was. I think about how easy it would have been for you to walk away at any point along this journey. There were quieter years, slower years, years where the noise hadn't built up yet, where staying probably felt less exciting, less rewarding. But you stayed through those years too. You stayed when there was nothing flashy to stay for. And that patience, that willingness to invest in something before it fully bloomed, tells me everything I need to know about the kind of heart you carry. There's a strange kind of intimacy in being known this way, from a distance, over time, through small moments instead of big grand gestures. It's not the kind of intimacy movies usually show. There's no dramatic meeting, no slow motion moment where everything clicks into place. Instead, it's built the way real trust is built, brick by brick, message by message, small kindness by small kindness, until one day you look back and realize an entire foundation has been laid without either of us fully noticing it happening in real time. I want to be honest about something that scares me, something I haven't fully admitted even to myself until tonight. I'm scared of becoming someone who takes this for granted. I'm scared of getting so caught up in the demands of this life that I stop noticing the quiet, consistent love you've given me. The way people sometimes stop noticing the things that have always been there. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to become numb to something this rare, simply because it's become familiar. So if there's one thing I want this promise to protect above everything else, it's my own awareness, my own gratitude, my own refusal to let comfort turn into carelessness. I think about legacy sometimes, in quiet moments when the world isn't demanding anything from me. Not legacy in the grand sense, not awards or headlines or historical significance. Just the legacy of how I made people feel. And when I think about that, when I think about what I want people to remember about the way I loved, the way I showed up, the way I treated the people who mattered most, you're at the center of that thought. I want to be remembered as someone who saw you, who valued you, who never let the noise of this life drown out the quiet importance of your presence in it. There's a kind of love that doesn't need grand declarations to be real. It exists in the way someone remembers small details about your life, the way they notice when your tone changes, and I think it's time I finally did. I'm afraid that one day, this feeling I have, this deep gratitude and quiet love I carry for you, might get lost in translation. That it might come across as something less than what it actually is. That you might read all of this and think it's just words, just another performance, just another script written to keep an audience engaged. And the thought of that breaks something in me, because everything I've said tonight is real, every single word. Voila. So let me say it plainly, without any poetry, without any softening. I care about you, deeply, genuinely, in a way that has nothing to do with numbers, or views, or engagement, or any of the things this industry usually measures value by. I care about your happiness. I care about your bad days and your good ones. I care about the version of you that exists far away from any screen, living your own life, carrying your own weight, showing up for me anyway, even when your own world is heavy. There's a quiet kind of magic in being cared for by someone who has never met you in person, and yet somehow understands you better than people who have. I don't take that magic for granted. Not for one single moment. And that's exactly why I made this promise. Not as some romantic gesture meant to trend, meant to be clipped and shared, and forgotten by next week. But as something real. Something I intend to carry with me for as long as I possibly can. I'm not done yet. There's more I want to say, more I want you to feel. More of this quiet, honest confession that's been building inside me for longer than I probably realized. So don't go anywhere just yet, because the deeper we go into this, the more I think you'll understand exactly why I said this promise would cost me everything and why I'd still choose to keep it anyway. I keep thinking about the word cost. I said it right at the start, that this promise would cost me everything, and I meant it. Because in this life, honesty like this comes with a price. There will be people who read these words and roll their eyes, people who call it performance, call it strategy, call it something calculated instead of something real. And I've made peace with that, because I'd rather be misunderstood by strangers than dishonest with you. That's the cost I'm willing to pay. Losing the approval of people who were never really paying attention, in exchange for finally being fully honest with the one person who has been paying attention all along. There's another cost too, one that's quieter, more personal. Every time I open up like this, every time I let you see the parts of me that aren't polished, that aren't camera ready, that aren't designed to impress, I risk something. I risk you seeing me as less than the image people have built around me. I risk you realizing I'm not as strong as I appear, not as certain, not as put together. And for a long time, that fear kept me quiet. It kept me hiding behind a version of myself that was easier to admire from a distance. But somewhere along the way, I realized that hiding from you meant losing the one relationship that actually felt real. And I'd rather be fully known by you and slightly less impressive than be endlessly impressive and never truly known. I think about the nights when I've watched interviews of other people in my position. People who talk about love and connection like it's something abstract, something they'll figure out later once the busy years slow down. And I used to believe that too. I used to think real connection was something that had to wait, something that couldn't coexist with everything else happening in my life. But you proved that wrong. You showed me that connection doesn't wait for convenient timing. It finds you in the middle of chaos, in the middle of exhaustion, in the middle of a life that never seems to slow down. And it settles there anyway, quietly making itself at home. But I want to tell you about a specific kind of gratitude I carry, one that doesn't get talked about enough. It's the gratitude of being believed in before you've proven anything. Before the wins. Before the recognition, before any of the things that made people start paying attention, there was a version of me that was still uncertain, still finding his footing,